My mom, she's hurt. They hurt her and she won't wake up. 6-year-old Leah Warren burst through Warrant Tech lobby doors, her white dress torn and dirty, her breath coming in ragged, terrified gasps that sliced through the sterile, air-conditioned silence. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the power of small moments to change lives, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Kindness True Stories. Also, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Behind her, the nanny stumbled in, phone pressed to her ear, her face a mask of pale shock, stammering incoherently to the 911 operator. Employees froze, their coffee cups halted mid-air, their keyboard clicks dying into a thick, stunned quiet. The security guard, a large man named Tony, rushed forward, his hand going to his radio. But Leah, with the unerring instinct of a child in a storm, ran straight past everyone, her small feet slapping against the cold marble, to the one person who had never once talked down to her. The janitor, methodically mopping the floor in slow, rhythmic arcs. Her small, grimy hands grabbed the coarse fabric of his gray uniform, clutching it like a lifeline. "Mr. Daniel, please," she sobbed, her huge eyes glistening with tears. "She needs help now." The man looked down at her, his weathered face, etched with lines of quiet endurance, showed nothing. A blank slate of impersonal service. Then something shifted deep within his eyes, a glacial snap. A focus so cold and immediate, it seemed to drop the temperature around them. He set down his mop with a deliberate clank. "Show me where." Daniel Carter had been invisible for 3 years. A ghost in the machinery of Warrant Tech. Every morning at 5 a.m. sharp, he arrived through the grimy service entrance, punched his faded time card with a hollow thud, and disappeared into the labyrinthine hallways and maintenance corridors the executives never saw, the arteries of the building that kept its gleaming heart beating. He cleaned bathrooms, emptied trash bins overflowing with the detritus of ambition, scrubbed coffee stains from expensive carpets, while employees talked around him like he was a piece of furniture, discussing mergers and acquisitions and weekend plans as if he were not there. At 39, Daniel looked older than his years. Gray streaked his temples, lines fanned from eyes that had seen too much, and his scarred, capable hands moved with a practiced, efficient grace that hinted at a history far beyond a janitor's closet. He never made eye contact, never joined the Friday happy hour conversations, never stayed in one place long enough for anyone to really see him. Management appreciated his silence. He was reliable, invisible, forgettable, perfect. Daniel lived in a basement apartment 6 blocks away, a space as muted and minimal as his existence. The rent was cheap because the ceiling leaked in the corner, and the heating rattled and barely worked in the winter. He didn't care. He owned almost nothing. A narrow bed, a small wooden table, 2 mismatched chairs, a single hot plate for cooking. On the scratched dresser sat a single, framed photograph that he kept perpetually face down, a silent monument to a past life. He hadn't looked at it in 2 years. Most evenings, he volunteered at a sun-bleached, underfunded community clinic in the poorest part of the city, teaching basic first aid to anyone who would listen. Street kids with wary eyes, elderly folks with nowhere else to go. He showed them how to clean wounds, to prevent infection, how to recognize the subtle signs of shock, how to perform CPR with steady, counted compressions. He never told them he used to be a doctor, a trauma surgeon, whose hands had once navigated the intricate landscape of life and death in a bustling hospital. Or he never told anyone. That man was buried. Cecilia Warren was everything Daniel wasn't. Visible, powerful, brilliantly successful. At 34, she'd taken over Warrant Tech after her father's sudden death 3 years ago, transforming the struggling software company into a major, aggressive player in enterprise solutions. Through sheer will and relentless intelligence, she worked 16-hour days, a silhouette against her corner office windows. She flew to investor meetings in 3 different cities each week, her laptop glowing in dark cabins. She negotiated contracts worth millions, while her daughter, Leah, colored pictures at the small desk in the corner of her office, the 2 of them existing in a fragile, loving bubble of mutual understanding. Being a single mother and a CEO meant she rarely slept, more than 4 hours a night, fueled by ambition and a deep love for her daughter. But Cecilia didn't complain. This was the life she'd chosen when she divorced Laya's father. A charming man who'd wanted a trophy wife, not an equal partner. Now she answered to no one except her daughter and her shareholders. Recently, though, something had been deeply wrong. Numbers in the quarterly reports bled into inexplicable discrepancies. Columns that didn't reconcile. Money was moving through shadow accounts that shouldn't exist. Digital ghosts in the ledgers. When she confronted her CFO, Richard Brennan, a man with an expensive smile and cold eyes, about the irregularities, he just smiled smoothly and assured her everything was fine. It was just a temporary audit glitch. She didn't believe him for a second. And the fear that she was being systematically robbed from within had begun to gnaw at her. Laya was supposed to be at ballet practice every Thursday evening. Instead, she often snuck away from her flustered nanny, riding the elevator down to the quiet, echoing basement levels where the air smelled of cleaning supplies and concrete, and where she'd found her favorite person in the whole building. "Mr. Daniel," she'd call out, her voice a bright bell in the stark corridors. Daniel would look up from whatever sink or floor he was cleaning and shake his head slowly, but there was always the hint of a smile, a softening around his eyes that he showed to no one else. He'd listen to her stories about school and her dolls, offering only quiet nods or a single thoughtful word, which to Laya was a universe of attention. Now, as Laya pulled him toward the private executive elevator, a tiny hand trustingly in his scarred one, the invisible man was stepping into the light. The security guard, Tony, moved to block them. "Hey, you can't just—" Daniel didn't break stride. He simply looked at Tony, and whatever the guard saw in those suddenly sharp, commanding eyes made him falter and step back. The elevator doors closed on the stunned lobby. Inside, Laya whispered, "She's in her office." The bad man was there. Daniel's jaw tightened. The elevator ascended swiftly. When the doors opened directly into Cecilia Warren's expansive office suite, the scene was one of violent disorder. Papers were scattered like fallen leaves. A chair was overturned, and a delicate orchid was shattered on the floor. Behind the massive desk, Cecilia Warren lay motionless, her blonde hair fanned out, a dark, troubling bruise blooming on her temple. Daniel's training took over instantly. The years of surgical precision, slicing through the fog of his self-imposed exile. He was at her side in 3 long strides, his fingers going to her neck, finding a pulse, thready too fast. He checked her airway, his eyes clinically scanning her pupils. "Laya, I need you to be very brave and bring me the first aid kit from the bathroom. It's a white box with a red cross. Can you do that?" His voice was calm, steady, a direct contrast to the storm in the room. The little girl, sniffing back tears, nodded fiercely and ran. The nanny and a few brave employees had followed them up, crowding the doorway in horror. "You call 911 again. Confirm they are en route and give them this update. Adult female, unconscious. Blunt force trauma to the head. Pulse is 110 and weak. Respiration shallow, Daniel." Commanded, his tone leaving no room for question. The nanny fumbled with her phone. Daniel, using his own clean handkerchief, applied gentle pressure to a small cut on Cecilia's scalp he'd just located. His mind was already racing ahead. Potential intracranial bleeding, spinal precautions. This was no simple feint. This was an assault. As he worked, his gaze swept the room, noting the safe behind the painting slightly ajar. The computer screen dark, but still warm. This was about the money, the discrepancies. This was Richard Brennan's doing. He was sure of it. Laya returned, clutching the large first aid kit. Daniel opened it, his hands moving with an expertise that made the watching employees exchange confused, awed glances. Who was this janitor? He stabilized Cecilia's head with rolled towels from the bathroom, spoke to her in low, reassuring tones, even though she couldn't hear, monitoring every second until the distant wail of sirens grew into a crescendo outside. As the paramedics rushed in, taking over, one of them looked at Daniel's makeshift interventions and nodded with professional respect. "Good work. You buy us time." Daniel just stepped back, fading towards the wall. The invisible man once more, but Laya ran to him, wrapping her arms around his legs. He placed a hesitant hand on her head. The paramedics lifted Cecilia onto a gurney. As they passed, her eyes fluttered open for a second, a sliver of dazed blue. They landed on Daniel, standing protectively beside her daughter, and in that hazy moment she saw not the janitor, but the man who had pulled her back. Then she was gone, whisked away, Laya and the nanny following. The office was left in chaotic silence, filled with police and murmuring employees. Daniel stood amid the wreckage, the ghost now fully materialized. He looked at his hands, still steady, still capable. He looked at the face-down photograph on his dresser in his mind's eye, and for the first time in years, he considered turning it over. The authorities would have questions. Richard Brennan would need to be found, and a little girl, and possibly her mother, would need someone who saw them when no one else did. The story was just beginning, and Daniel Carter, the forgotten janitor, the former doctor, was no longer invisible. Please support my channel by liking, sharing, and subscribing to Kindness True Stories. Your support helps us share more powerful stories like this one. Thank you for watching and being part of our community.